Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. It's Emerson Phillips joined by Wes Mitchell. Gamecocks moving into the bye week this week, so no game coming up on Saturday, but we did have a rare Sunday game for South Carolina. The Gamecocks coming up on the short end of a 28-14 score against SEC East rival Georgia. And Wes, a lot to talk about in this ball game, and we're going to touch on a number of topics from the Georgia game yesterday, but I think we should begin with what a tremendous crowd was on hand, given what has been, a very difficult week for a lot of folks in the Palmetto State with Hurricane Matthew. A lot of folks in Columbia were without power. Of course, the coastal areas of South Carolina were evacuated going into the weekend because of the threat of the hurricane. That moved the game to a 2:30 kick on Sunday, a very rare Sunday game for South Carolina, and the place was almost full, Wes.
Yeah, obviously, Emerson, we want to send out all of our thoughts to those who were affected by the storm, and obviously I think a lot of people, even if you weren't affected by it, you probably know somebody who was, so we want to send out those thoughts. But I thought as far as football goes, it was just another sign of how much football matters to the people in the state of South Carolina. We actually had a bunch of people on our boards, Emerson, who were displaced by the storm, and we're basically like, I'm not going home yet anyway. I'm going to go to the football game. So, I think football and Ray Tanner was in a very difficult spot because regardless of his decision, he was going to be criticized. But I thought in the aftermath of everything, the decision to still play the game, but to move it to Sunday afternoon, proved to be absolutely the right decision. It was a great crowd. I think it was a good chance for people who have basically spent their whole weekend and leading up to the weekend focused on a storm, got to sort of, get out of that mindset a little bit and go watch some football. And, I thought that absolutely if we really want to get deep, I mean, sort of the fact that the storm had moved on and that the sun, rose on Sunday, it was literally a perfect day for football on Sunday. You could not have asked for a better day for football, and the fans turned out, and it was kind of interesting, some of the different Georgia media folks. I even got asked on like Thursday or Friday, are South Carolina fans even going to be excited for this? Is anybody even going to show up with everything going on? And I just kind of paused. I was like, dude, it's South Carolina, Georgia. The Clemson game is obviously the biggest game every year for South Carolina. But when the Clemson game is on the road, then those same years, the Georgia game is at home. So, I think this, to a lot of fans, is the biggest home game of the year when South Carolina-Georgia match up. South Carolina almost always plays Georgia close at home, even when they have a lesser team. And I think we saw that again on this, I keep wanting to say Saturday, but on this Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, Georgia led 14-0 at halftime. A couple of TD runs for Nick Chubb, a 15-yarder and a 1-yarder. And Wes, strange first half. The Gamecocks committed 3 turnovers in the first half. Georgia had difficulty throwing the ball, to say the least, but they didn't have to throw it. They ran it very successfully. Chubb had the 2 first-half touchdown runs, and even though the Gamecocks had turned it over 3 times in the first half, it was only 14-0 at the break, and the Gamecocks were still in the ball game.
It just had kind of, did it not almost have that South Carolina-Georgia feel to it? Like, even when Georgia is a better team, which Georgia's a more talented team than South Carolina, they do have some inexperience at spots, clearly, but I think they're overall a more experienced team, and they have more depth, and they were the better football team. But South Carolina just sort of hanging around, just kind of felt like that typical Georgia can't put this game away against South Carolina. They had multiple opportunities. It's 14-0. Georgia has a shot at the end of the half. Kirby Smart, I couldn't tell in person, and I couldn't tell watching it on TV either in the replay what happened at the end of the half when he didn't get the timeout. Like, I couldn't tell if the ref didn't see him or if he just froze and didn't hit it in time, didn't realize the clock was running. But South Carolina, got a little bit of a break from Georgia possibly being able to heave one up or maybe try a long field goal. The wind was kind of whipping a little bit at that moment, I noticed. So then, Georgia drives down, has a chance to go up 17 or 21-0. South Carolina gets an interception on a nice tip ball by Jamarcus King, who I think continues to play well. Gamecocks continue to just hang around. You almost had a feeling, hey, could something Could something special happen here? 14-7 ball game. And then I think that it just goes back, Emerson, to self-inflicted wounds. And, if you're a great football team, if you have a ton of talent, if you can just out-talent teams up and down the field, you can make mistakes, because mistakes are part of football. They really are. Teams, even, Alabama, best football team in the nation until somebody proves otherwise. Ohio State, Clemson, whoever you want to talk about. Every team makes mistakes, but they have the athletes to sort of to still win games. I think right now South Carolina just in a place, and we'll go into some of those mistakes in a second, but I think just at a place right now where they can't have these just big self-inflicted wounds and win games. The margin of error is just too small.
Yeah, Gamecock certainly had some self-inflicted wounds in the first half, but only trailed 14-0. It felt like it was a ball game, even though the Gamecocks got shut out in the first half. And then in the third quarter, West, the only score of the third period was a 90-yard Gamecock scoring drive. It was capped off by a Deebo Samuel 9-yard touchdown run. And here we are in the third quarter, a 14-7 ball game. The Gamecocks have finally got some momentum. Gamecock fans got to be happy to see Deebo Samuel not only healthy but playing well. We got a glimpse of what Deebo Samuel is capable of. He had missed the last 3 ball games due to injury, so he's back for the Georgia game. He gets into the end zone, and it's 14-7, and it really felt like at that point the Gamecocks had the momentum, and they might have a chance to come back and win.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think 2 things to unpack right there, Emerson. One, Deebo Samuel. I've even noticed almost a little bit of just negativity from a segment of the fan base about Deebo, and while I'm done with him because of the injuries and stuff like that. But I think he showed why so many people are so high on his ability. This is a guy, and it's hard for the staff because they've not been able to count on him. But now that we've all seen what he can do, I think you make a case for this is a guy that you have to try to find a way to get the football to. In South Carolina's second touchdown drive, his little there was a 3rd and 9, I remember, and he just ran a little like pigtail route where he juts in then out, and Orth hit him well short of the sticks, and he makes a guy miss and drags another guy for the first down. That's just when we talk about other teams having playmakers, athletes that just make plays, Deebo was one of those guys. If you get him the football, he can make plays for you. The touchdown play, a jet sweep, that's twice we've seen him score on a similar play this year. May have even been the same exact play. It looked very, very similar to the one against Vanderbilt. So, that's a play where, was it blocked perfectly? Probably not necessarily. Was it blocked well enough to give your guy some room? Yes, you got a block on the edge. I think Rico Daddle had a nice block on that play. Get the ball to Deebo, good things seem to happen. The other side of that, to tie it all together, is that I'm not so sure. I know he had the muff. I'm not early in the year. I'm not so sure you don't maybe give Deebo another shot at the punt return game, because this has become a bigger issue than I think any of us knew it was going to be. If you look at the punt return game for South Carolina this year, you've had a muff punt against Vanderbilt. You've had a punt return for touchdown get called back because of a block in the back against Kentucky. You've had a muffed punt against Texas A&M when you're about to get the ball back and possibly go down for a game-tying score in the fourth quarter. And now you had Hayden Hurst, who they thought they could put back there and just say, hey, go catch the football. You're a mature veteran, at least in age. You're 23 years old. Go catch the football and don't make any mistakes. And you had what I thought was possibly the most, harmful error of the game was right after that score, the Deebo Samuel score. South Carolina's defense went out and got a stop. It's 14-7. There's some momentum. The crowd is in the game. Georgia's punting, and Hurst, obviously inexperienced back there, got out of the way instead of running up and fair catching it. The ball hits at the 31, and then it rolls all the way to about the 3-yard line. And that to me was the killer, because the entire sequence of events moving after that were directly affected by that play, because we all know way easier to execute at the 31 than it is at your own 3. South Carolina goes 3 and out. You could almost see the future when that happened. If South Carolina goes 3 and out, You know that Georgia is going to get the ball in great field position, and you know that Georgia is going to get their running game going again and probably going to have an opportunity to put the game away, and they did. So, that to me was just another example. It was absolutely killer for them, Emerson. And, you look at Georgia, as well as they ran the football, and they did run the football well. South Carolina couldn't stop it, but, South Carolina averaged 5.1 yards per play on offense. Georgia averaged 5.3 yards per play on offense. So there wasn't that much of a discrepancy, but the turnovers, the field position, that's not a turnover in the book, but by letting that ball roll over 25 yards and then you punt the ball back to Georgia, I think they got the ball about the 43, maybe the 40-something yard line. You give a team like that great field position, they're already able to run the football well. To me, those things were the difference in the ball game.
14-7 Georgia at the end of the third quarter, but then the Bulldogs got a 6-yard touchdown pass. Jacob Eason to Isaiah McKenzie to make it 21-7. Rico Dowdle scored his first touchdown as a Gamecock in a 1-yard run with 1:40 to play to cut it to 21-14. But then on the Gamecock onside kick, Georgia scooped it and swooped it 43 yards for a touchdown. And that accounted for the final score. Georgia 28, South Carolina 14. The Gamecocks are now 2-4. And Wes, recapping some of the final numbers from this game, Georgia completed 5 passes the entire game. They threw for 29 yards in this ball game, but they were able to win it by 2 scores because they ran 50 times for 326 yards. They had 3 backs over 80 yards in the ball game. Brian Harrion carried 9 times for 82 yards. Nick Chubb, 16 for 121 and the 2 scores. And Sonny Michel, 21 for $133. So Georgia ran the football up and down the field. They didn't have to throw it. And Muschamp after the game said, yeah, they threw it 17 times, and that might have been 17 too many.
Yeah, and I agree. Emerson, I'm sitting there watching the game. I'm like, you know what a coach is going to say. A coach is going to say, well, you got to be balanced. You got to remain balanced. I don't know if Georgia had to throw the football at all. It was one of those things where they had so much success running the ball. There were multiple. I got at least 2 images in my head of 3rd and longs where Georgia is able to just run the football and still pick up the first down. So defense obviously wasn't perfect. They were giving up too much against the run. Now, in the grand scheme of the game, I thought the defense did what they always do. Those guys are very resilient. They hang in there. They seem to make plays when they absolutely have to. And, even the Georgia touchdown for them to go up 14-0, that had the makings. That was almost a nice little goal line stand. They stopped Georgia on 1st and goal for the 1, 2nd and goal from the 1, and almost did on 3rd and goal from the 1. So the defense, it's hard for me, even though you can certainly say where they could play better. When you look at where they're coming from, Emerson, talking about last year, with pretty much the same personnel, right? I mean, you got Jamarcus King in there now, but for the most part, this is very similar personnel to last year. When you look at the defense and the strides they've made, you can easily nitpick and point out areas they could be better. But I'd have a hard time being too hard on the defense because of so much improvement there that you've seen and just the way that they find a way to give the team a chance. But unfortunately for South Carolina, these games are starting to become very similar. It hasn't really mattered the opponent. South Carolina has just been in games where they hang around, the defense gives them a chance. They have brief periods where you see semblance of pretty good offense, but for the most part, too much inconsistency on offense, no running game to speak of on offense, and too many self-inflicted wounds.
No running game, Wes. Let's talk about that. 26 carries for 30 yards total for South Carolina in this ball game, and the Gamecocks did allow 5 sacks, lost 33 yards on those 5 sacks, but Georgia's defense recorded the 5 sacks. They also had 8 tackles for loss. And Wes, when you're talking about offensive line play, you look at 2 things. You look at run game productivity and you look at pass protection, and the Gamecocks didn't have much of either against Georgia.
Absolutely. And I think those 2 things go hand in hand. If you don't run the football, then it's much more difficult to throw the football because you're in 3rd and longs, and the defense can pin its ears back and get after your quarterback. I tend to think, personally, that the running game issues seem to me to be a bit greater than the pass protection issues. I think when South Carolina's sort of able to stay out of those third and longs, when the quarterback makes fast decisions and gets the ball out, the pass protection, I'm not saying these guys have been great in pass protection, but the pass protection has been pretty solid comparatively to the running game. But, I think you look at just the running game consistently throughout the entire season, and you say there just has not been that push up front that you need. Now, I think a guy like Rico Dowdle has given them a chance. He's shown he can break tackles. He's shown he can provide a burst. But then you see, once again, the sort of situation the staff is in. You play a true freshman because you feel like you have to, and he produces a fumble. A.J. Turner is playing as a redshirt freshman. He had a fumble. You also had a swing pass drop that, is just a concentration thing where he looks up first and would have went for a big play. This is sort of the situation you're in where you're having to play a bunch of freshmen, and then your offensive line, the offensive line, no matter how good you are in other areas of the game, the offensive line just has to play solid for any of the other playmakers to be able to make plays, I think, and that's just not been a consistent thing. They'll show flashes of it, but for the most part, it has not been consistent. And to me, it all starts sort of with the push up front in the running game. If they could get that push in the running game, I think a lot of these other issues would sort of go away. I mean, you look at the second downs and third downs that South Carolina was facing. If you probably went back and averaged them out, Georgia's facing 2nd and 5s, 2nd and 3s, 2nd and 2s, 3rd and 2s, where South Carolina is facing a lot of 2nd and 9s, 2nd and 8s, and 3rd and 7s and stuff like that. Just the percentages, the numbers, no matter how you break it down, that's not going to get the job done for you.
South Carolina 2 of 13 on third down conversions in this ball game. That's been a problem all year as well for the Gamecock offense. So a lot of mental mistakes, some untimely penalties, and the Gamecocks struggling right now at 2-4 overall, 1-4 in SEC play. South Carolina with a bye week this week before they will host UMass 1 week from Saturday. Gamecock Central Radio here. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell. We invite you to download the Gamecock Central Radio app. We've got a free phone app that allows you to listen to Gamecock Central podcasts on your cell phone. You get it for free anywhere you receive cell phone service. You can listen on your phone. The GCR app is available on the App Store and on Google Play. To subscribe to the podcast, search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. Wes, let's talk about the quarterback situation for the Gamecocks real quick before we wrap it up. Perry Orth, had a pretty good stat line, 26 of 36. That's a very good completion percentage. He threw for 288 yards, did have the one pick. Numbers-wise, Orth looks pretty good, but the Gamecocks just not putting enough points on the board.
Yeah, and, we were laughing before we started recording, Emerson. I mean, we've probably talked about quarterbacks in every single podcast we've recorded this preseason through the season, just because it continues to be an issue. And I think I'll admit I'm a bit torn because it's hard to be too completely hard on Perry Orth, because at this point he is what he is. He is a great teammate. He works incredibly hard. A great human being by all indications. And at most programs, if you've recruited and developed at the quarterback position, Perry Orth's not having to start. So if a guy is going out and doing the best that he can, it's not really fair to criticize him too much. Now, if we're just going to look at the quarterback position itself, and you still have to turn around and say, though, South Carolina has to get better play from that spot, because you look at the stat line, but then you also say there were several plays where our completions in the stat line, but a receiver, maybe catches a ball that's behind him. In the case of Keel Pollard, he literally takes away what looked like an interception from a Georgia player. Now Orth had several great throws, but then other times, I distinctly remember a 3rd and about 5 early in the game. People want to blame a lot of play calling, but 3rd and 5, Georgia's in man coverage. They run Terry Guger on just a little shallow cross. All of Georgia's other defenders have vacated because they're running down the field with receivers in man coverage. And here comes Cougar breaking open. He's got all types of field in front of him. All you have to have is a good, solid touch pass leading him. He's got a first down. The ball's behind him. Cougar sort of has to reach back, tips the ball to himself, catches it, and then falls down about a yard and a half short of the sticks. That's a completion in the books, but you're in real life, you're punting. And, people will blame Kurt Roper, but that's a good call. The execution consistently is just not there right now. And, you look at this quarterback position moving forward, where do you go from here? Because at the end of the day, you have a true freshman that just simply, really not to any fault of his own either, is just not ready, to be a consistent passer. And then you have a a fifth-year senior walk-on who does everything the right way, but just doesn't really have the running ability either to keep defenses honest, doesn't have the great O-line and great playmakers around him to where you could tell him just to sit back there and sort of manage the game, to use the cliche. You almost, to make things work right now with the O-line problems, you almost need a dynamic quarterback to maybe erase some of those mistakes. You need a Connor Shaw, I think. They don't have that right now. And I don't know what the answer is. A lot of people are obviously yelling for Jake Bentley, and that's, to me, that's a difficult decision to make, because I could sit here and I could probably make, and it's not that I would be making things up. I would believe both sides. Like I could make a compelling case to go ahead and say, use the bye week to get Jake Bentley ready and roll with Jake Bentley. But I could also make the compelling case of, hey, let this guy not be thrown into the fire, redshirt him, year in the weight room, year in the playbook. You look at redshirt freshman quarterbacks in college football. There's been some very, very good ones that have redshirted and then set the world on fire their second year. Jameis Winston was a redshirt. He was outstanding his redshirt freshman year. Francois, the kids at Florida State now, he's a redshirt freshman. There's a case to be made for that too. So I don't know what the answers are, because right now there's no easy answer for this staff, and the fan base is going to criticize. You can use hindsight after the fact, and it's going to be 2020, and you can even make the case for playing Lorenzo Nunez as a wildcat, change of pace to maybe try to get the running game going a little bit. So, there's no easy, obvious answer in my opinion.
All right, the Gamecocks still experiencing growing pains as we are now halfway through the 2016 season, the first year for head coach Will Muschamp. And Wes, TJ Moore decommitted over the weekend, Wes, and our listeners today can read more about that on Gamecock Central. Wanted to get you to talk about that briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a situation where you have a four-star kid. He was originally looking at South Carolina and Tennessee, obviously committed to South Carolina, and it's just something South Carolina's going to have to combat. South Carolina right now is 2-4. Tennessee, has only lost one game this year. They're still leading in the SEC East race. They're in a good position right now. So, South Carolina has sold these kids on coming in and playing early, being a part of the turnaround at South Carolina. But then, these kids sit there and watch South Carolina lose games and watch Tennessee or whoever win games. And, just because a guy's on the commitment list doesn't mean he's obviously going to sign. So this staff is going to have to just continue, and they will. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. This is exactly what they're going to do, is they're going to sit back and keep recruiting these guys just like they're uncommitted. And TJ Moore is the type of player South Carolina needs to physically, needs to turn things around on the offensive front. So, they'll keep working him and keep trying to the end. They still got, one of his teammates committed, so they've got a good relationship at that school. I wouldn't say it's completely over, but this is just something when you're 2-4 and trying to get big time players that other SEC teams want. you're always going to have this danger, I guess.
All right, Wes, we'll continue to follow this situation here on Gamecock Central. Everybody gets a chance to sort of catch their breath this week with the bye week. What you doing this weekend, Wes?
I will probably be watching a lot of college football.
Yeah, I figured you would.
Yeah, so we'll sit down, watch some football, maybe throw something on the grill, but it'll be fun. And I've enjoyed, I always enjoy the chance to sit back and watch all the other games too, and see what's going on in the rest of the college football world. And I'm sure you can almost always these days find a pretty good game on. So how spoiled are we that just about every single decent game is on TV now?
Yeah, I know a lot of folks sort of set their fall schedule up around the bye week. I know there's a lot of weddings in South Carolina this weekend and a couple of charity golf tournaments and that kind of thing. People know not to schedule these type of events typically on a Gamecock football Saturday, which we will not have this Saturday because it is the Gamecocks bye week. Wes, thanks again. We covered a lot of ground today and a lot to talk about with Gamecock football. The Gamecocks will try to regroup and get ready for the second half of the season. Thank you.
Absolutely, and quick note, the UMass game, a noon kickoff. That was just announced right before we started recording. So that, I guess, to be expected. Probably going to see some of those nooners, as Steve Spurrier used to call them, and the Gamecocks get one for UMass. So, but yeah, appreciate it as always, Emerson, and look forward to the next podcast.
All right, thanks, Wes. UMass coming up on the 22nd. Then it'll be Tennessee and Missouri at home, followed by road trip to Florida, home against Western Carolina, and then at Clemson to wrap up the regular year. For Wes Mitchell, I'm Emerson Phillips. This is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for being with us.